Have you ever noticed that success, like chance, seems to favor those who keep showing up? The more often you try, the more likely you are to win. This isn't luck. It's a universal principle at work. It's called the law of averages. This is Earl Nightingale, and today I want to talk to you about a principle as steady and certain as the rising sun, the law of averages. In life, much like in business or sport, the law of averages reminds us of a simple truth: the more we try, the more we succeed. It does not guarantee victory on the first attempt, nor does it promise ease. What it offers, however, is certainty that repeated effort eventually brings reward. Think of the salesman who knocks on doors. He knows that not every door will open and not every conversation will end with a sale. But he also knows that if he knocks often enough, someone will say yes. The principle works not by chance but by law. For if you cast enough lines into the water, you will catch a fish. If you make enough calls, you will reach the right person. If you try enough times, you will succeed. The law of averages whispers this wisdom. Every no you receive is simply another step closer to yes. This idea has built fortunes, won championships, and shaped the destinies of men and women who refused to give up when the odds seemed against them. Now, how do we apply this in our own lives? First, by recognizing that rejection is not a verdict, but a statistic. The world will tell us no more times than it will say yes, but we need only a handful of yeses to change the course of our lives. Second, we must commit to numbers: more calls, more efforts, more attempts. Where most give up after a few failures, those who succeed are simply the ones who kept trying until the averages worked in their favor. Think of it like this: a baseball player can strike out 7 times out of 10 and still be considered great. Why? Because he understands the game is built on averages. Life is the same. If we swing enough times, we'll connect. The law of averages rewards persistence, and persistence belongs to all of us. It doesn't ask for brilliance, it doesn't demand perfection, and it doesn't require genius. All it asks is that we keep going. So here is the central thought to remember. The law of averages is the quiet guarantee that effort, multiplied over time, produces results. And here is your call to action. Whatever your goal, whether it's building a business, writing a book, mastering a skill, or simply becoming the person you know you can be, begin today. Knock on one more door, make one more call, take one more step. Do it again tomorrow and the day after, and the law of averages will begin to work for you. Because in the end, success belongs not to those who try once, but to those who try until. The law of averages is one of the simplest yet most profound principles we can ever come to understand, because it reminds us that the very act of persistence carries with it a built-in reward. Life in all its forms is governed by numbers, by patterns, by probabilities that eventually even out if we are willing to keep showing up. Too many people give up after the first few attempts, believing that failure is a sign that something isn't meant for them. In reality, failure is simply the natural toll we pay on the road to success, and the law of averages ensures that the longer we travel, the greater the certainty that reward will meet us along the way. Imagine a man who casts his line into the water. The first throw may yield nothing, the second the same. Perhaps the third brings him only a small catch, one hardly worth keeping. But if he continues, if he casts his line again and again, the law of averages will guarantee that eventually he will bring in a prize worth the effort. Life functions no differently. When you apply for jobs, when you make sales calls, when you attempt to learn a skill, you are fishing in a vast ocean. The early attempts may bring little, but persistence makes reward inevitable. What separates the successful from the unsuccessful is not genius or extraordinary talent, but the willingness to keep trying long enough for the averages to work. Every no that you encounter is not a closed door forever. It is simply one more step closer to us. If you continue long enough, the balance must tip. The law of averages cannot be denied. It favors the persistent, it favors those who refuse to quit, and it favors the man or woman who understands that rejection and failure are not outcomes but steps in the process. The tragedy of most lives is that people give up just short of success. They allow the first sting of defeat to convince them that they are unworthy or that their goal is impossible. But the truth is that the outcome was still in motion. The averages had not yet had time to balance. It is like walking away from a field before the harvest has ripened, leaving fruit behind because the farmer grew tired of waiting. Effort over time is never wasted, because each attempt, each trial, each failure brings us closer to the inevitable result. Think of a child learning to walk. The child does not give up after falling once or twice. No, the child falls countless times, yet continues, driven by instinct and persistence. Eventually, as surely as the sun rises, the child walks. That is the law of averages at work. When we grow older, we sometimes forget this simple truth and allow a few failures to stop us. But success has always belonged to those who keep going, because the law of averages ensures that effort over time must pay off. Every rejection is not the end of the road, but rather a mile marker on the journey toward acceptance. Too many people hear the word no and allow it to echo in their minds as if it were a final verdict, when in reality it is only one step along a much longer path. Life is built upon a sequence of attempts, and not every attempt will succeed. The law of averages tells us that with enough effort, the balance shifts, and what once seemed like endless refusals eventually gives way to the certainty of success. The wise individual understands this, and instead of shrinking back at rejection, he uses it as fuel to move forward with even greater determination. Consider the salesman who goes from door to door, knowing full well that most doors will close in his face. He does not despair, for he knows that each door closed places him one step nearer to the one that will open. The rejection does not defeat him, it is part of the process. He counts it, embraces it, and understands that in the mathematics of effort, every refusal is simply a necessary step that leads him closer to a yes. Rejection should never be taken personally. It is not a declaration of our worth, nor is it a sign that our dream is impossible. Rather, it is evidence that we are in motion, that we are playing the game of life instead of watching from the sidelines. The man who never hears no is the man who has never asked, never tried, never risked, and while he avoids the sting of rejection, he also forfeits the joy of eventual acceptance. To live fully, we must risk the no in order to earn the yes. Think of history's greatest achievers. They were not the ones who succeeded at the first attempt, but those who endured countless refusals and setbacks until the scales finally tipped in their favor. Writers whose manuscripts were turned down again and again, inventors whose ideas were mocked, leaders who were doubted by nearly everyone around them, all faced rejection, and yet it was those very rejections that carried them closer to recognition and success. The difference between them and those who failed was not talent alone, but perseverance in the face of rejection. Every rejection you face is a silent reminder that you are still in the arena, still pressing forward when others have already given up. And with each one, you are moving nearer to the point where the door opens, where the right person says yes, where the opportunity aligns with your persistence. It is not a matter of if, but when, provided you continue. So embrace rejection as a natural part of progress. Let it be your teacher, not your enemy. Each time you hear no, remember that it brings you that much closer to wise. The man or woman who understands this principle holds a quiet power, because they no longer fear rejection. They see it for what it truly is, a stepping stone to acceptance. Success, like nearly everything in life, is built upon numbers. It is a game of probability, of effort multiplied, of persistence applied steadily over time. Too often we imagine success as something mysterious, something reserved for the fortunate few, when in truth it is governed by laws as dependable as gravity. One of those laws is that success is a numbers game, and the more consistently you act, the more certain the results become. Imagine a farmer who plants only a handful of seeds. His harvest will be small, not because the soil was unkind, but because he did not plant enough. Another farmer, more diligent and consistent, scatters hundreds, even thousands of seeds. Though many will fail to grow, enough will take root to provide him with abundance. The difference is not in the soil, but in the consistency of planting. Success in business, in relationships, in personal growth works in the same way. The more you put forth, the more opportunities you create for something to flourish. Consistency is the multiplier of results. A single action taken once rarely produces much. But an action repeated, refined, and multiplied over time becomes unstoppable. Consider the athlete who trains every day, the musician who practices daily scales, the writer who sits down each morning to put words on paper. None of them may see dramatic results in a day or even in a week, but compounded over months and years, their consistency creates mastery. Success, then, is not the result of one grand effort, but the accumulation of countless small ones. The law of averages ensures that not every attempt will succeed. You may fail more times than you succeed, but it is not the failures that count. It is the total number of attempts. When you understand success as a numbers game, you no longer fear rejection or disappointment. You see them as part of the equation, part of the process that makes success inevitable if you continue. Every call you make, every door you knock on, every attempt you give adds to the total, and sooner or later the numbers reward you. Most people stop too soon. They quit after the first failures, not realizing that they had not played enough hands, had not given the law of averages the chance to work in their favor. Success does not ask for genius, it asks for consistency. It does not require perfection, it requires persistence. The man who keeps trying, who keeps showing up day after day, ultimately discovers that the numbers fall on his side. Think of water dripping on stone. A single drop does nothing, but thousands of drops falling in steady rhythm can wear away rock itself. That is the power of consistency multiplied over time. In the same way, our daily efforts, though small in isolation, accumulate into something powerful, something unstoppable. Success is never an accident. It is the direct result of steady effort multiplied through the numbers and guaranteed to reward the one who persists. Opportunity is not something that vanishes when it is missed once, nor is it a door that opens only for the fortunate few. It is a river, flowing constantly, and those who stay by its banks long enough will always have another chance to step in. Most people approach opportunity with excitement at first, but when results do not arrive quickly, they retreat. They withdraw their effort and declare that life has been unfair. Yet the truth is simple and unwavering. Opportunity expands for those who persist longer than most. The world is filled with men and women who gave up just short of success. They let discouragement convince them that their work was wasted, when in fact they had only needed to stay a little longer. The one who holds on, who endures, who continues working after others have stopped, finds himself surrounded by openings that others will never see. Persistence has a way of clearing the field. When most competitors have left, the one who remains stands in a place where opportunity can no longer be crowded out. Think of a miner digging for gold. He may dig for weeks, even months, finding nothing but rock and earth. Many will quit in frustration, believing there is nothing there. Yet the one who digs a little deeper, who continues beyond the point where others stop, may strike the very vein of gold that transforms his life. Opportunity rewards that kind of endurance. It rarely yields its treasures to the impatient or the half-hearted. It reveals itself to the ones who keep going when the rest have surrendered. Persistence does more than just keep us moving forward. It develops us. The very act of enduring builds strength, sharpens skill, and teaches patience. By the time the opportunity finally presents itself, the persistent individual is prepared to seize it. Meanwhile, those who quit early not only miss the chance but also lack the growth that persistence creates. The opportunity expands not just in quantity but in quality, because the longer you persist, the more capable you become of handling the rewards when they arrive. We see this principle in nature. Rivers carve valleys not by rushing furiously for a day, but by flowing steadily over centuries. The tallest trees do not grow in a single season but endure storm after storm, standing longer than the rest. In the same way, opportunity grows larger for the individual who remains steadfast through the tests of time. Life seems to lean in favor of those who refuse to be shaken, as if rewarding the spirit that does not break when difficulty comes. When you persist longer than most, you separate yourself from the crowd. You no longer compete in the crowded space of beginners. You enter the rare space of finishers, and in that space opportunity is no longer scarce. It multiplies, it opens, it expands, because the world has a way of yielding its richest rewards to those who keep going when others do not. Failure is one of the most misunderstood experiences in life. People treat it as a final judgment, as if it were a permanent label placed upon them. But failure is nothing more than feedback, a temporary stop on the way to success. It carries with it lessons, adjustments, and a chance to try again with greater wisdom. Quitting, however, is something entirely different. Quitting is when we decide that the struggle is not worth it, when we remove ourselves from the game entirely, and it is only then that failure becomes permanent. For as long as we continue, as long as we rise after each fall, success remains possible. Think of a child learning to ride a bicycle. He wobbles, he tips, he falls. To him in that moment it feels like failure. But as long as he gets back on, as long as he continues to try, he is still moving towards success. The falls are temporary, part of the process. If he were to put the bicycle away forever, to decide he would never try again, only then would failure be permanent. Life is no different. Each stumble we face, each disappointment is a momentary setback, never a final one unless we choose to quit. The great men and women of history understood this truth. Thomas Edison, when asked about his thousands of failed attempts at creating the light bulb, famously remarked that he had not failed, but had found thousands of ways that would not work. He saw each so-called failure as temporary, as part of the journey. Had he quit, we would not remember his name. Abraham Lincoln suffered defeat after defeat in politics, but he refused to quit, and because he continued, he rose to the highest office in the land. Their failures did not define them because they refused to give them permanence. Failure, in fact, is the great teacher. It refines us, sharpens us, and toughens us in ways that comfort never could. Each setback carries within it a lesson, and those who keep moving forward gather wisdom with every attempt. Quitting, on the other hand, shuts the door on all lessons, all possibilities, all future victories. It is the only true defeat in life. As long as you keep trying, the door to success remains open, no matter how many failures lie behind you. The difference between temporary and permanent is simply a matter of choice. We cannot always control outcomes, but we can always control our decision to continue. If we see failure as temporary, as part of the stepping stones to success, we will never be discouraged for long. But if we allow quitting to take hold, we cement our defeat. The truth is clear: failure will visit everyone, but it is quitting that decides who is finished and who is destined to win every no we hear in life carries with it a quiet gift. At first it may sting, it may discourage, it may feel like a door closing against us. But when seen with understanding, every no is not the end of the road, it is a stepping stone leading us closer to yes. The law of averages assures us that if we continue, if we persist through the rejections, the refusals, and the closed doors, eventually one will open. The mistake most people make is believing that a no is permanent when in truth, it is simply part of the path that leads to success. Consider the salesman who sets out to make calls. He knows full well that most people will say no. He prepares for it, he expects it, and he even welcomes it because he understands that with every no he hears, he moves one step closer to the inevitable yes. The man who dreads rejection will quit before the averages can reward him, but the man who embraces rejection as a stepping stone cannot be stopped. For him, each refusal is progress, proof that he is still on the journey toward acceptance. This principle does not apply only in business, but in every aspect of life. When you seek opportunity, when you apply for jobs, when you pursue dreams, you will encounter refusals. They are not signs that you are unworthy, they are signs that you are engaged in the process. The only ones who never hear no are those who never ask, never try, never risk. But those who risk rejection, who step into the arena of effort, gather no's like tokens that bring them ever closer to the prize of yes. History is filled with men and women who were told no time and time again, writers whose manuscripts were rejected, inventors whose ideas were dismissed, dreamers who were laughed at. All had their share of no's. But each no carried them further down the path until the right door opened, until the world finally said yes. Their greatness was not in avoiding rejection, but in refusing to be defeated by it. Every no can be seen as a redirection guiding us toward the right opportunity. Sometimes the refusal protects us from the wrong path, making way for the one that was meant for us. In time, as long as we continue, the yes we are seeking appears, often better than the one we first imagined. But this happens only if we keep moving, only if we see each no not as a roadblock but as a stepping stone. When we adopt this perspective, rejection loses its power to discourage. It becomes part of the mathematics of success, part of the law of averages that cannot fail. Every no we hear is not a setback but progress, because it means we are one step closer to the yes that will make all the difference. Action is the great multiplier of success. Every dream, every goal, every vision we hold in our minds is only potential until we act. And the moment we take action, no matter how small, we set in motion a chain of events that increases our chances of success. The more we do, the more we try, the more we put ourselves into the stream of opportunity, the higher the probability that something will work in our favor. It is a principle as dependable as the rising sun. Doing more raises your odds. Too many people spend their time waiting. They wait for the perfect opportunity, for the perfect timing, for the perfect plan. In the waiting, nothing happens. Opportunities cannot be caught by those who stand still. It is only by moving, by trying, by stepping into the unknown, that we begin to encounter the doors that can open for us. A man who makes one attempt has a chance, but a man who makes 100 attempts has a certainty that at least one will succeed. That is the power of action applied consistently. Think of an archer firing arrows at a target. The first may miss, the second may fly wide, but the more arrows he releases, the greater his odds of hitting the mark. The man who stands with a bow in his hand, forever planning the perfect shot without ever loosing the arrow, never scores at all. Life is exactly the same. Every action you take is an arrow released, and though many may fall short, enough of them will strike the target to change the course of your life. The law of averages favors the doer. The world does not reward the one who only thinks, but the one who acts. Knowledge without action is like seed left in a sack. It carries potential but produces nothing. Plant the seeds, water them, and give them time, and the harvest is inevitable. The same is true for our ambitions. Each action is a seed planted, and though not every seed will grow, enough will take root to provide abundance. The great achievers of history were men and women of action. They were not always the most gifted or the most brilliant, but they were willing to take more chances, to make more attempts, to keep moving when others stood still. Action opened doors for them that talent alone could not, and so it will for us. Every call we make, every letter we write, every door we knock upon adds to the probability of success. The beauty of this principle is that it places control in our hands. We cannot dictate the outcome of every effort, but we can dictate the number of efforts we make. The more we do, the greater the odds swing in our favor. And in time, as surely as the night follows the day, one of those actions will connect. One of those steps will land, and success will arrive because we acted instead of waiting. A mastery is not a gift that falls from the sky, nor is it a prize reserved for those born with extraordinary talent. It is a result of repeated attempts, of consistent effort, of showing up day after day and applying yourself to the task at hand. Too often, people expect immediate perfection, and when it does not arrive, they grow discouraged and quit. But the truth is that excellence, the kind that endures and transforms lives, is forged through trial, error, and persistence. Each attempt, no matter how flawed, is a step along the path to mastery. Consider the musician learning a new instrument. The first notes are awkward, the timing is off, and mistakes are frequent. To the casual observer, it may seem that the musician is failing, that progress is slow. But with each repetition, the fingers grow more confident, the rhythm steadier, and the sound more pleasing. There is no shortcut to this process. Each attempt, each practice session, contributes to the gradual accumulation of skill, until what once seemed impossible becomes second nature. Mastery is simply the sum of repeated, focused effort over time. The same principle applies to every field of endeavor. The writer who struggles over each sentence, the athlete who trains relentlessly despite initial failures, the entrepreneur who experiments and adjusts with every setback, all are engaged in the process of mastery. None of them expects perfection at the first try. They understand that skill grows incrementally, and that every misstep carries a lesson. The law of averages ensures that with enough attempts, success becomes not only possible but inevitable. Each repetition builds competence, confidence, and insight, moving the individual closer to true mastery. Most people are unwilling to endure the slow accumulation of effort. They glance at those who are highly skilled and assume they achieved greatness effortlessly, not realizing the countless hours, the repeated failures, and the persistent practice that preceded visible success. The truth is that mastery rewards patience, diligence, and the willingness to fail repeatedly without losing enthusiasm. Each attempt, no matter how small or imperfect, lays the foundation for the next until skill becomes automatic and excellence becomes a habit. In life, as in any craft, the desire for instant perfection is a trap. It fosters impatience, discouragement, and surrender. But those who embrace the process of repeated attempts find that their abilities grow beyond what they imagined. They discover that mistakes are not obstacles, but signposts pointing the way toward improvement. With each effort, they accumulate the experience, the insight, and the resilience necessary to achieve mastery. The path to mastery is not glamorous, nor is it swift. It is marked by persistence, by returning after failure, by putting in the work day after day, and by trusting that each attempt, no matter how imperfect, brings you closer to excellence. Those who understand this principle learn to value progress over immediate perfection, and in time, what once seemed difficult becomes effortless, and what once seemed impossible becomes reality. Discipline is the quiet force that separates those who merely dream from those who achieve. Dreams, as beautiful and inspiring as they are, remain nothing more than visions until acted upon. Many people possess brilliant ideas, vivid aspirations, and lofty ambitions, yet without discipline. These dreams drift into the realm of what could have been. Discipline is the bridge that carries intention into action, and action into results. It is the daily commitment to do what must be done, even when enthusiasm wanes, even when obstacles appear, even when the path seems long and arduous. Consider the writer who aspires to craft a novel. Inspiration alone will not produce a book. Sitting down every day, putting in the words, refining, editing, and rewriting, that is discipline. The first draft may be imperfect, the ideas may stumble, but the daily habit of showing up transforms a dream into reality. Discipline does not promise speed or ease, but it guarantees forward movement. It is the engine that converts desire into accomplishment. The most successful people in history understood this principle intuitively. They knew that talent alone is insufficient, that luck alone is fleeting, and that brilliance without habit is wasted. They structured their lives around consistency, self-control, and persistent effort. Discipline gave them the framework to harness their abilities and focus them on meaningful goals. Without it, even the most passionate individual drifts, buffeted by distractions, temptations, and the daily ebb of motivation. Discipline is the tether that keeps us on course, the rudder that guides our ship toward achievement. In practical terms, discipline manifests as small, repeated actions: waking early to work on a goal, dedicating focused hours to study, resisting the temptation to postpone, prioritizing long-term gain over short-term comfort. It is not glamorous, and it is rarely celebrated in headlines, but it is the invisible architecture of success. Every step taken with intention, every task completed despite reluctance, strengthens the bridge connecting our present selves to the lives we imagine. The absence of discipline is the root of regret. Dreams left unattended, ambitions abandoned, potential unfulfilled, all stem from the failure to cultivate consistent effort. Discipline, by contrast, empowers us to endure difficulty, maintain focus, and follow through even when the journey becomes tiring. It is the difference between a vision that fades with time and a vision that materializes into tangible achievement. One of the greatest truths about discipline is that it compounds. Every act of self-control, every deliberate choice to persevere, strengthens the habit, making the next act of discipline easier and more natural. It transforms willpower from a fleeting resource into a reliable ally. In this way, discipline does not merely bridge the gap between dreams and achievement. It gradually narrows it, turning what once seemed distant into something reachable. Those who embrace discipline discover a freedom that is paradoxical. By binding themselves to habits, to routines, to consistent effort, they gain the ability to achieve goals that might otherwise have remained fantasies. They learn that dreams, when coupled with discipline, become inevitable outcomes, and that the only real barrier to achievement is the unwillingness to take consistent, deliberate action toward the life we envision. Persistence is the hidden key that turns the law of averages from an abstract idea into a force that works in your favor. Most people misunderstand the law of averages, thinking it only applies to luck or chance, when in fact it is a principle that rewards sustained effort. Each attempt, each effort, each small step adds to the total, gradually shifting the balance towards success. The person who gives up early never benefits from this principle, because the law of averages requires repetition, and it favors those who persist longer than most. Consider the story of a salesperson making cold calls. The first 10 calls may yield nothing. The next 10 may bring polite refusals. Yet if the salesperson continues undeterred by disappointment, sooner or later a call will result in a sale. Every rejection is not a setback but a necessary step in the process. Each attempt increases the probability that the next one will succeed. Persistence transforms the abstract numbers of probability into tangible results, and those who understand this principle act in a way that guarantees the law of averages will work for them rather than against them. Persistence is not just about quantity, it is also about quality. Each effort teaches a lesson, each setback provides insight, and each repetition hones skill. Over time, the individual becomes more capable, more confident, and more prepared to seize opportunity when it arrives. The law of averages is impartial. It does not favor talent, wealth, or education, but it does favor consistency and endurance. Those who persist develop an advantage that cannot be taken away, because they have positioned themselves to benefit from the natural probabilities of repeated effort. The world is full of examples. Inventors who faced dozens of failures before achieving breakthroughs, authors whose manuscripts were rejected countless times before becoming bestsellers, entrepreneurs who struggled for years before their businesses prospered, all understood, either consciously or intuitively, that persistence unlocks the law of averages in their favor. They did not rely on luck, they relied on sustained action, trusting that repetition, combined with patience and learning, would eventually yield success. Without persistence, even the most talented individual will falter. One attempt is rarely sufficient, and the first failure is rarely the final measure of capability. It is only through continued effort that the law of averages begins to tip toward advantage. To persist is to place yourself squarely in the stream of opportunity, to keep your efforts accumulating until the numbers themselves produce results. Persistence also strengthens character. It builds resilience, patience, and determination. It teaches us to see rejection not as defeat but as feedback. Every setback becomes a lesson, every challenge an opportunity to refine strategy, every no, a step closer to wise. By continuing where others quit, by maintaining effort when others give in to discouragement, the persistent individual ensures that the law of averages is no longer a distant principle, but a practical tool working in their favor. And so, when we step back and look at the principles we've explored, the law of averages, the value of persistence, the power of repeated action, the lessons found in every rejection, and the discipline that bridges dreams and achievement, we see a single truth emerge. Success is not a matter of luck, nor a sudden stroke of genius. It is the inevitable result of steady, deliberate effort applied consistently over time. Every no becomes a stepping stone to yes. Every failure is temporary, and every attempt increases the probability of success. Mastery is built not in a day, but through repeated, persistent effort. And those who understand these principles learn to move forward when others quit, to act when others hesitate, and to persevere when the odds seem against them. Life rewards action, endurance, and consistent application of effort. It favors those who do more, try more, and refuse to be discouraged by setbacks. The law of averages is not some abstract concept. It is a promise that if you persist, if you show up, and if you commit to the process, the odds will eventually align in your favor. Dreams become realities, goals become achievements, and potential becomes excellence for those who act with discipline, patience, and unwavering persistence. So take this message to heart. Apply it in your work, in your studies, in your relationships, in your personal growth. Begin today, continue tomorrow, and never let temporary defeat or rejection convince you to quit. For in the end, the bridge between where you are and where you wish to be is built with action, reinforced with persistence, and guided by the understanding that the law of averages is always at work for those who refuse to give up. And so, when we step back and look at the principles we've explored, the law of averages, the value of persistence, the power of repeated action, the lessons found in every rejection, and the discipline that bridges dreams and achievement, we see a single truth emerge. Success is not a matter of luck, nor a sudden stroke of genius. It is the inevitable result of steady, deliberate effort applied consistently over time. Every no becomes a stepping stone to yes. Every failure is temporary, and every attempt increases the probability of success. Mastery is built not in a day, but through repeated, persistent effort. And those who understand these principles learn to move forward when others quit, to act when others hesitate, and to persevere when the odds seem against them. Life rewards action, endurance, and consistent application of effort. It favors those who do more, try more, and refuse to be discouraged by setbacks. The law of averages is not some abstract concept. It is a promise that if you persist, if you show up, and if you commit to the process, the odds will eventually align in your favor. Dreams become realities, goals become achievements, and potential becomes excellence for those who act with discipline, patience, and unwavering persistence. So take this message to heart. Apply it in your work, in your studies, in your relationships, in your personal growth. Begin today, continue tomorrow, and never let temporary defeat or rejection convince you to quit. For in the end, the bridge between where you are and where you wish to be is built with action, reinforced with persistence, and guided by the understanding that the law of averages is always at work for those who refuse to give up.